see the yellow is all this. Cortex is on the outside, as we talked about before. Each renal pyramid, oh, and in between the renal columns, right? Each renal pyramid is going to drain into what is number 11 right here? Minor calyx. Each minor calyx is going to drain into, what's number 12 right here? Major calyx. Each major calyx is going to drain into pelvis. Right. This tube is going to be called the ureter. Ureter. Yes. You can see lots of tiny little glomeruli right here. These little yellow dots. Can't see them on the real kidney because these are much, much larger than they would actually be in real life, right? These are normally much, much smaller. But they enlarged them here so that you could see them. And then here you can see some renal tubule going on. All of this is going to drain into a collecting duct. Here's the renal patella right here. And then go into the minor calyx, major calyx, pelvis.
Are you going to have the ducts? Ask for the ducts on the diagrams?
Papillary duct?
All the ducts?
Oh, like the proximal convoluted tubule and stuff like that?
Does it ask for does it show the difference in nephron, juxtapeduliar,
well,
the type of nephron? You can ask for that.
I won't ask for that.
Okay.
Could you separate the ducts with pictures? I mean, the duct is quite hard on that.
I could. It depends on how nice I'm feeling. Depends on how much you harass me.
Everybody, before you leave, tell her that she's beautiful.
Yes. Very good. Any questions on this part of the kidney? All right. So we're going to take one of these pyramids and we're going to zoom in, right? I'm zooming in here. So this is one renal pyramid and the associated cortex. You can see these little yellow dots. These are all the glomeruli. You can see the little blood vessels on the inside of some of them. And again, these are much, much larger than they would be in real life, so you can't see these on a real kidney. But you can see in a little bit more detail the renal tubule and the renal corpuscle. Proximal convoluted tubule, descending and ascending. It's called the loop of Henle in your book. Loop of Henle, nephron loop, that's all the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. Descending limb, ascending limb. Here's the distal convoluted tubule. Go into a collecting tubule. Here's a collecting duct. And down into the renal papilla, minor calyx, major calyx, etc.
They kind of have it stretched out then.
Yeah, this one is a little bit more stretched out.
The descending is, or sorry, distal, I mean, is kind of on the other side.
Yeah, it's so,
It's the other way.
yeah. So normally, this is much more stretched out than it is normally.
Where's the proximal then?
So proximal is going to be right next to the glomerulus. It connects directly to this capsule right here. Here's proximal, loop of Henle, and then here's distal right here.
Hey, but that's confusing because the distal actually touches the...
Yeah,
I know.
where the...
I know, which is crazy because right here, it's accurate as far as showing the distal convoluted tubule with the juxtaglomerular apparatus with the glomerulus. But I think they just wanted to stretch it out more here to make it more obvious what's distal, what's proximal. But right here, this is close-up of the glomerulus, and this is more accurate. So this whole thing is going to be the renal corpuscle, right? You have the tangle of capillaries, that's called the glomerulus, and the green capsule on the outside would be called the glomerular capsule, yes. And then here, this bright green tube right here on top, this is going to be part of the distal convoluted tubule that actually touches part of the afferent arteriole, right? So here you have your juxtaglomerular apparatus.
How do you
So
tell?
this is anatomically correct.
Does that tell the cells on each one? Does it,
Sort
the
of.
neural cells and baculodental?
Sort of. It has it labeled here.
You might ask that.
Probably not.
Okay.
I highly doubt it.
How do you tell between an afferent and efferent when you're like switching the diagram around?
I would probably, if the picture or the model did not already have arrows showing blood flow, I would probably add them. So if it's going into the glomerulus, is that afferent or efferent? Afferent. Efferent exits.
Yeah.
Efferent exits glomerulus. Afferent
I knew
is
that.
into. I knew that. Alright, any questions on any part of this model?
Will you be calling it a renal corpuscle or glomerular corpuscle?
So renal corpuscle is this whole thing. Glomerular capsule is specifically this area surrounding the glomerulus.
No, but doesn't that whole thing have the two different names, renal corpuscle and glomerular corpuscle?
Yeah, the Bowman capsule and glomerular capsule is the same.
Like everything has two names.
Renal
Yeah, it
corpuscle.
seems like everything has like two names.
Yeah, it's a pain, I know.
How about the cells inside the capillary part of the glomerulus?
As far as like the
The
podocytes and the pedicels and the filtration slits. I can't remember if your lab manual has a good picture or not. This model does not show it very well.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of, yeah,
Just know it.
it doesn't have that very well on here. So I probably wouldn't ask you, not on this model at least, the podocytes. If I'm asking you for a specific cell on a glomerulus, then you're going to tell me podocyte, right? Because those are the specific cells on the outside of the glomerulus.
Path of the urine?
Path of the urine. All right, so we'll start with the glomerulus. So you have filtration, so all the blood is filtered into the glomerular capsule. Then we're going to go into proximal convoluted tubule, descending, then ascending, loop of Henle, distal convoluted tubule, collecting duct, down through the renal papilla. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Minor calyx, major calyx, pelvis, ureter, urinary bladder, urethra. If we're talking about males, you have prostatic urethra, membranous urethra, and then spongy.
You want those two?
I will be specific in my wording, but you should know the different parts of the urethra and male.
Remember. Spongy too?
Yep.
So you're gonna have a question about the urine flow, right?
I might. It's a possibility. But not everything that's on the study guide will make it onto the test. I try to cram as much as I can, but sometimes
So
I
what are the
just
ones that
run out of
aren't going to be on there?
questions. Which is the one? I'm sorry.
Just know everything.
Alright, any other questions about this model? Nope. We can move on to a different model.
You want this one?
We've already talked about this more or less. We have kidneys, make urine, drains into the, what is this tube? Ureter. And then this pouch is the bladder, and this tube is called the urethra.
How about the veins? You know, the renal veins.
Yeah, so here's renal vein, here is renal artery. And then, oh, they do have some blood vessels on here. Sort of. Remember there are two sets of interlobar arteries and veins. The ones that run in between and through the columns, those are interlobar veins and arteries. And also the ones that branch off from the arcuate arteries and serve, you get branches of afferent arterioles to each glomerulus off of it. Those are also interlobar arteries and veins. So be careful with that word.
What about the interlobular and interlobar? What's the because there's like interlobular and interlobar. You know what I'm talking about?
One's smaller, one's like a little bigger.
Yeah, they're,
It's only interlobar.
yeah.
Well, in the book it has it labeled different. I can look it up.
Yeah,
I'm gonna find it.
yeah, show me.
Like the ones that go in between the pyramids, and then there's interlobular, and I think they come off the top of the arcuate veins. They go
Those
to the
should
glum.
both be, interlobar
Okay.
arteries and veins. I wonder if you're letting me know.
I think in the book we talked about the ones that are top, they're small, they call it interlobar, because they're smaller. Can't know what you're talking about.
Those should also be interlobar arteries and veins.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
Pretty sure. It just had it twice on the word bank.
But if you find something different, then do tell me. All right.
Here it is.
Yeah. Okay.
Interlobular.
Yeah. So this word is interchangeable. Interlobar, interlobular. The words themselves are interchangeable. So interlobular. There's the, and this is just a difference in your textbook versus your your lab text versus your lecture text. So you have the saying interlobar arteries running down these renal columns, and then you have the arcuate arteries and veins, and then you have more in your book called, this book calls them interlobular. So I'll make sure.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I'm gonna be here.
These are
Your lab manual, yes.
Oh,
really? I'll make an adjustment in your choices. I'll include interlobular in parentheses.
I know, it's really rude. They've been quiet.
Yeah, pointed out, definitely go down to Alright, any other questions about, we'll cover, urinary system on these two real quick.
Is the wrong one?
So here is male. This pouch is called the bladder. And just so we know which part of the urethra we're in, this gland right underneath the bladder is called the prostate. So this tube right here is called the prostatic urethra, and you can't see them right here, but the next spot is going to have the bulbourethral gland. This part of the urethra is called the membranous urethra, and then going through the spongy part of the penis is called the spongy urethra. So for females, this top pouch up here is what? This is uterus. So this tube would be the vagina, right? Not the urethra. Pouch on the bottom is the urinary bladder, and so this tube leading out of the urinary bladder is the urethra.
So this is like the cervix, right?
Yep.
There.
Yeah. So cervix would be the bottom part of the uterus. So yeah, right there.
On the video, it's really weird.
It is crazy, huh?
Yeah. Goose.
Yeah.
Like, miracles.
Yeah.
We got
We were like wondering how they got those images.
It is pretty awesome.
Like, gosh,
Photography.
Or I guess I'll follow. I'm not worried, but I just, you know, like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Any questions about this one?
Oh yeah, the labia and all that.
The labia?
I say it's like right under.
Yeah, it could. So the outer lips would be labia majora or minora. Majora, and the inner lips would be minora.
And so it goes for the male, the prostatic, and then membrane,
Prostatic, then membranous, then spongy.
it's going, and where's the bulbous?
Bulbourethral glands you can't see on here, but they'd be, it's tiny little glands. I'll pull up the reproductive male in just a minute.
Just past the
But
prostate.
yeah, just underneath the prostate, right before the penis starts. Right between. Alright, you guys good on? Alright, so any other questions on urinary system? Ready to move on to reproductive? Yeah. Start with female first. Alright, so this pouch is called
Vagina.
This
The uterus.
is uterus. Since this is a uterus and not a urinary bladder, that means this tube is called
Vagina.
vagina. I always, every semester, somebody tries to tell me this is a urethra. This is a uterus, which means the tube has to be a vagina, right? Yes. Let's look at backside for just a second. These little yellow oval areas are called ovaries. Those are the female gonads or gametes. Gonads, very good. You can see a little bit of this raised area. It's a ligament that helps to hold the ovary in place. That ligament is called the ovarian ligament. Yes. So you have over here, this shows an egg being ovulated. You can see various follicles here. One's ovulated, and so these little finger-like areas are going to catch that egg. Those are called fimbriae, and then the egg is going to travel into the uterine tubes. The widest part is called ampulla. Yeah, ampulla. So it's going to keep traveling through these called uterine tubes, also fallopian tubes, also oviducts. I will use uterine and then in parentheses fallopian tubes. Those are the two most common names. So now we are in the uterus, right? So there are regions of the uterus and there are layers of the uterus. Let's talk about the layers of the uterus first. This whole outer area of the uterus is called what metrium? Perimetrium. This very thick muscular layer, the dark pink, is the myometrium. And this inner light pink layer is called endometrium. Which layer is going to, will the fertilized egg implant? Endometrium, that's right. So those are the layers. How about regions? This top part of the uterus is called the fundus, right? This main area of the uterus is called the body, and this bottom part of the uterus right here is called the cervix. These folds in the vagina are called rugae. And you also see rugae in the urinary bladder as well. And I'm going to pull out the other female reproductive model, see if there's anything else that's fun. Alright. So again, top pouch is called the uterus, bottom one is the urinary bladder. The tube that leads from the urinary bladder is called urethra. Tube that leads from the uterus is called very good. Very, very good. Here you can see the labia minora and the labia majora, also labia minus and majus, and all sorts of. The smaller ones are the inner layers, right? And the labia majora are the outer layers. And then this little blue section right here would be the clitoris. Yes.
Where's that? THMUS?
The isthmus. So that is in the fallopian tubes. It's right in between. So eggs ovulated. The fimbriae are the little finger-like things that are going to catch it, and then that region right there is going to be the isthmus that it first passes into, and then it widens up a little bit and a little farther down, and that's the ampulla. Any questions about female reproductive system?
I think they have a labeled opposite. I think 15 is supposed to be the ampulla, and then 13, the one in the middle, is the isthmus.
Some of the keys are mislabeled.
You want to ask
But the ampulla is more, it goes to the
envelope
isthmus first.
in the diagram?
Not on that, no. Because it doesn't show me the different layers of the endometrium in there, so I'm not going to ask you. Functional versus basic. Alright, ready to move on to male? Alright. Alright, so this larger pouch up here is called urinary bladder. This gland right underneath is the prostate gland. And here, let me see if you have the other side shows better. Yeah, the other side shows a little bit better labeled. So right here, this number 6 right here, it's teeny tiny. This little bitty gland is the bulbourethral gland. That's right. Yeah, it's a lot of letters in the name. So again, when we're talking about the urethra, this is this whole tube, right? Everything from the urinary bladder going all the way through the penis. When it passes through the prostate, it's called prostatic urethra. When it passes the bulbourethral glands, membranous urethra. When it passes through the penis, it's called spongy urethra. Very good. Oh, let's look at the outside. Talk about glands.
Cavernous something.
Corpora cavernosa, corpus spongiosum. Can't distinguish very well on here. I have to use a picture. Accessory glands. We've talked about the prostate already. Let's go to the back side. This area right here, this gland is called seminal vesicle. Yeah, you have one on both sides. This tube that runs by the seminal vesicles is called vas deferens. It's not, do you have the picture on here? Sort of. You can kind of sort of see it. We talked about the urethra already. That's its main tube. I would be unlikely to ask you it on this particular model, but this tube is supposed to go back around up by where the vas deferens is. So this little tube right here would be called the ejaculatory duct, right? Sperm would come through here, and then the ejaculatory duct joins up with the prostatic urethra, right? Glands. Oh, testes. Those would be testes, right? Or testis. And then this little hat-like structure on top, number 2, is called epididymis. Yes.
Are you going to say hat-like structure?
Yes. It's a very scientific language. I like to do that, yes.
Can you see the, is that a top hat, lower hat?
It's like a beret, I would say. It just kind of sits kind of off to the side. I think of it as a beret.
Mons pubis.
So mons pubis is going to be the raised area of just kind of fatty tissue right above. So it'd be like this area right here. The mons pubis. You see lots of adipose tissue right there.
Can you see the suppository ligament? That means you're not going to have
I think this one is considered, or they labeled that one as
Nah.
little nub.
How about the follicular cells?
So follicular cells, I could use, or whenever you really need, I could use this tiny little area. You have a nice, big, colorful picture in your textbook that has follicular cells. You also looked at a slide full of follicular cells
Oh, yeah.
in the ovary.
You actually know some slides, right?
Yes, you do have to
Can you
use
name
slides.
them?
But with that slide, when we say ovary, instead of, would you have sort of specific follicular cell in the
I
slide?
could. I'd be more likely to say name this tissue and you tell me ovary.
Okay.
But if I wanted to be mean, I could.
Okay.
I would be more likely to use a picture. Because
Right.
pointing it out on a slide, different slides are going to look a little bit differently and it'd be easier and less likely to result in many angry emails if I used a picture.
Okay.
I don't like
I think
So, slides that we talked about. For urinary system, we saw a ureter and kidneys. For the kidneys, you know those because there were lots of little circles. You could see all the little glomeruli, right? And we had the experiments. And then we had, so for male reproductive system, we saw a slide of sperm as well as a testis and epididymis, right? There was lots and lots of coiled tubules in that one. Epididymis was on the left, and testis was on, it all looked like coiled tubules. Yeah, it was one slide. And then for female reproductive system, you looked at uterus, and you looked at an ovary.
You said we looked at a ureter too.
Nose tube. It looks very similar to what was in the one.
The yolk sac and all that.
Sure. I need to borrow a picture.
Is it a picture or is it like?
So so like with the pregnancy model, I could ask you uterus, ovarian ligament, ovary, ovarian ligament actually, fallopian tubes, chorionic villi. Here's the amnion, the amniotic fluid. Baby even has a little bit of an umbilical cord. You could see. You could ask that. You can also see the umbilical cord here, how it connects to the chorion. Remember, there are two parts of the placenta. There's the chorion and the endometrium, but those more of lecture test thing. So I could ask you those structures on there. As far as yolk sac, morula, blastocyst, I'm going to have to use pictures of that. All of that embryonic stuff. I'm going to have to use pictures.
37, we had this activity 2 function called the nephron. Can you go over that?
So you had an experiment where you had an Erlenmeyer flask, and you had a funnel, and you had some filter paper.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's the one with the charcoal and cobalt solution. Yeah. But it,
And so you mixed the solution in a beaker. It was 1/3 charcoal, 1/3 blue copper solution, and 1/3 water. And you mixed it all together, and then you poured it through the filter paper into the Erlenmeyer flask, right? So based on, after you poured it in, you could see in the flask what color it was, and you could see what was filtered. If it was filtered, then it made it into the flask, right? If it was not filtered, you saw it all over that filter paper, but none in the flask, right? So what color was the water, what color was the solution in your, in the bottom of the flask after you filtered it? Blue. So water made it through, and that blue copper solution made it through, right? So what didn't make it through? The charcoal. That should have been all over your filter paper. Why didn't the charcoal make it through the filter paper? Too big, right? So you can make analogous comments from that experiment to a real nephron. So what was the filter paper? What did that symbolize? Specifically in the nephron, what did it?
the glomerulus?
The glomerulus, specifically that filtration membrane of the glomerulus, right? It was the thing that everything was filtered through, and the glomerulus is a big part of that. So filter paper was the filtration membrane, and so that solution was filtered through into the Erlenmeyer flask. So what was the flask? What does that symbolize? The capsular space, yeah, the glomerular capsule. Also, you saw that the filtration rate changed over time, right? When you initially put it in, stream of solution coming out fast or slow? It was fast. As time went on and more stuff became filtered, did it get faster or did it get slower? Slower. Slow enough to count the drops, right? So filtration rate changed over time. It got slower. And this is due to what type of pressure? Hydrostatic pressure. You had, as more of that fluid was filtered through that filter paper, you had less weight that was pushing down on it, and that's hydrostatic pressure. So the decrease in hydrostatic pressure caused the decrease in glomerular filtration rate, or filtration rate, symbolic glomerular filtration rate.
But the kidneys would be sloughing all that stuff off, putting it back in to be filtered somewhere else, and it wouldn't be like the filter paper was just gonna get stopped up.
So, no, it wouldn't get, so your kidneys try to maintain a constant GFR, and we talked about various ways that it can adjust GFR. So the charcoal that wasn't filtered, so that would symbolize your, like your red blood cells and your large proteins and stuff like that. I feel like I got off on a tangent from your original question. Did I answer your original question?
Yeah, you were on the hydrostatic, but at some point, if that stuff didn't move on, then it wouldn't move, no matter how much pressure you put on top, because it would be full of crap in between.
Yeah, so if hydrostatic pressure were to continue increasing, then you are at risk for you filter too much out. So you could get, potentially you could get like red blood cells and larger proteins and stuff that's not supposed to be filtered. You could start filtering that if your hydrostatic pressure gets too high, which is why your kidneys have all those mechanisms to regulate GFR.
So what happens to the stuff that's not filtered?
So the stuff that's not filtered stays in the blood. It goes right out through the efferent arteriole. It's going to head into the peritubular capillaries, and it'll have a chance to be secreted later if it's not supposed to be in the blood. But always next time through the kidneys to try again. Filtering.
Just kind of backtracking, but the pathway of sperm from the testes, is that just defined?
So pathway of sperm, I think for my Wednesday night class here. I don't think so. You're all on my Monday, Wednesday morning, or Tuesday, Thursday, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so pathway of sperm through the testes. There are a lot of tubules in the testes. So we're going to start with the seminiferous tubules, right? And then from the seminiferous tubules, go into the straight tubules. And then into that weird network that's in the middle, that's called the rete testis, right? And then from the rete testis, we're going into the efferent tubules. You're just going, from the seminiferous tubules, you're just tracing all those tubules toward the epididymis. So after efferent tubules, we're in the epididymis. All of those coiled tubules down the epididymis, this all counts as epididymis. Epididymis is then going to go into the vas deferens, or the ductus deferens. Ductus deferens goes all the way around the back, past the seminal vesicles into the ejaculatory duct, right? And at this point, we're adding some secretion. Ejaculatory duct is going to merge with your prostatic urethra, and then membranous urethra, and then spongy urethra.
Wait, we have to know all that for the whole pathway?
That is the entire pathway.
So we have to know all the parts you just named?
And be able to label them on a picture.
That was their extra credit.
That was your
On the
credit.
test.
Yep.
What'd you get after ejaculatory?
Ejaculatory duct is going to merge with your prostatic urethra. The membranous.
Oh, right.
The spongy urethra. Lots of tubes. What are the questions you guys have for me?
So it's going to be these models, cat, kidney, that's
And Punnett scores, yeah, I get a Punnett scores on there. Pictures from your lab manual also are getting.
kind of Punnett squares are you going to, just the regular 4, or are you going to do?
Yeah, just four.
Intricate?
Just four. Oh, I'm not going to have examples of complex in here, just on there.
Wear my lab coat when I come in.
No,
Okay.
no. Just, I'll have different types of inheritance, but there will still just be two alleles that we're talking about. So there's strict dominant recessive inheritance, where is it dominant, is it recessive, heterozygous, homozygous, those kinds of things. Do you guys remember that? Make sense? No? Okay, so when we're looking at two alleles, there are three different possible genotypes, right? You can be homozygous dominant with two big, let's talk about widow's peak. So we'll say W. If you have two uppercase W's, then we'd say that's homozygous dominant, right? Two of the same, homozygous, dominant, they're both uppercase. And those letters are symbolic for a DNA sequence, right? It's just shorthand, but the uppercase does mean dominant. So that's homozygous dominant would be two uppercase letters. Two lowercase letters would be homozygous again, same kind of letter, but recessive because they're lowercase. Dominant alleles will mask recessive alleles, right? So if a person has one or two dominant alleles, they will show the dominant phenotype. So if a person is homozygous dominant, two big W's, or if a person is heterozygous, hetero meaning different, if it's a large W and a little w, heterozygous, as long as you have at least one dominant allele, you will have the dominant phenotype. So homozygous dominant and heterozygous genotypes would exhibit the dominant widow's peak phenotype. Does that make sense? If a person is homozygous recessive, two lowercase w's, there's no dominant allele to mask the recessive. So that person would have a straight hairline. And so based on when you're doing Punnett squares, you have your two alleles from mom, and then you have two alleles from dad, and you cross everything through that table, right? I will have those filled out for you on the test. I will tell you specifically what is the dominant phenotype, what is the recessive phenotype. You tell me, based on what you see in the Punnett square, what is the likelihood that offspring from this couple will have a child that shows this particular phenotype or has this particular genotype?
For the A and B always, they're dominant to O, right? O is the recessive.
Yes, O is the only recessive.
Yeah. O.
So we're talking about blood groups. A and B are co-dominant. So if you have AB, that is technically heterozygous. You have two different alleles, but they're co-dominant. Neither one is going to mask the other. So people with an A allele and a B allele are going to have type AB blood. O is always recessive. So if you have A and little I, that's going to be type A blood. You have to have both lowercase in order to get type O blood. So that's, we talked about strict dominant recessive, we talked about blood group. There may be an example of sex-linked inheritance. So like red-green colorblindness or baldness, those are examples of sex-linked traits. That DNA is found on the X sex chromosome. Because males only have one X chromosome, you see this phenotype much more often in males. So male pattern baldness, red-green colorblindness, much more commonly found in males. All they need is one recessive allele, and they'll have that phenotype because they don't have another X chromosome to have a dominant allele to mask it. Does that make sense?
So are they always going to express whatever the mother has if the dad matches it?
If the male child gets the recessive allele from either mom or dad, well, I guess you couldn't get it from dad because you get the Y chromosome. So if he gets the recessive allele from mom,
He will show it.
he will show it.
But in a female case, she wouldn't.
And in females, she would, if you only have one, the female won't show it if she has a dominant allele to mask it. It is possible for females to be red-green colorblind or bald or any of other X-linked traits. It is possible for females to have that. But you have to have two recessive alleles. You have to have a recessive on both of those X chromosomes. So dad has to have it, and mom has to at least be a carrier, and you have to get hit twice, which is why you don't see it nearly as often in females compared to males. Males only need one, females have to have two.
Is there a breast diagram or something? Or, like, is there a study?
Picture in your lab manual. But I don't think there's a model.
Or what size?
Breast.
How many questions do you have about the traits and the gene phenotype?
Heredity.
Yeah.
I don't know. I tried to split up the sections as equally as I could. Obviously, it's harder. It's for me to ask more questions, like on the urinary function chapter where we did the experiment. Obviously, there are some questions I can ask you about that, but versus all of the anatomy I can ask you about the urinary system, it's biased in some areas, but I tried to make it as equal as possible.
In terms of the video or the questions that you went over, a good representation?
If you're in my labs, the questions that we discussed after the video. If you're in Tuesday, Thursday lab, the questions that you have assigned for homework are excellent study materials.
Did you email those to us?
No, Dr. Pierce will assign those to you for homework. So if you have it on Thursday, then you'll get them.
Okay.
Yeah, he did send it to me, I got it.
Did you send it to us?
Yeah, I got it today.
I'll do it.
Are we getting those questions?
We went over them in class.
No, we talked about them in class. That's what you guys get. You don't have a hard copy, but we talked about them in class.
I'm going to the...
Can you show me whiskers?
With
I
this?
didn't get to miss that.
Yeah, you guys want to, let's talk about the cats again?
Everybody's in the way.
Let's go see what you can do.